Okay, I believe we're coming up on the time to get started here. Julia, would you give us a roll call, please?
Sure. Mr. Haw,
Yes.
Mr. Suda,
Yes.
Mr. Dance,
Here.
Ms. Kaminsky,
Here.
Mr. Peterson,
Present.
Ms. Goodman.
Here.
Okay, good. Everybody's had a chance to look at the agenda, had a chance to review it. Any changes, additions? If not, could I have a motion, please, to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Support.
Okay. Julie, a roll call, please?
Mr. Dance,
Yes.
Ms. Goodman,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Aye.
Ms. Kaminsky,
Yes.
Mr. Haw,
Yes.
and Mr. Suda.
Yes. Okay, since we don't have any public here, there's no public comment, we'll pass on by that. And Barry, do we have the next item, our little presentation update from Right Side Design with Brandon?
I believe we do. Brandon, I see you just jumped on. You're muted though. There you
Sorry. Hi, everyone.
Hello, Brandon.
Morning.
Morning. All right. So Barry, do I have the ability to
Should.
drive right now? Okay.
Yep.
All right. Can everyone see this?
I'm seeing it.
Okay.
How about
Super.
everybody else? So Brandon, it's yours. Go ahead and give us
All
an
right.
update.
All right. So this is pretty stereotypical that we, circle around with all of you at this time of year. A little bit different this time of year because of COVID, but nonetheless, just to give you an update as to the marketing program over this past year and then what is planned moving forward in the next upcoming budget year. So if you recall my presentations from the past, this will feel very familiar. But the budgetary review of what the airport has had available for budget funding, and this is all inclusive. So this is of airport funds, this is of air carrier funds, and also Mdot funds as well. So this essentially outlines that this past year we had $30,000, and moving forward into 20 and 21. We have 25 now. Some of that is with some funds that were available that, based on when Cape Air came online and when we spent them, we're straddling, a different carrier in the budget years here. But essentially for 20 and 21, we have approximately $25,000 available in funding, split between the airport itself and also the Mdot awareness grant, which a note on that I'm pretty sure all of you are fairly familiar with the Mdot awareness grant. It's a yearly grant cycle by Mdot for marketing initiatives for individual airports. And this upcoming year, we do not anticipate that program being funded by Mdot, and that's throughout the entire state of Michigan. Barry, is that still correct as you know it on your end?
That is most definitely correct, yes.
Okay. So we're going to not have that funding source for the upcoming year. So that will alter some of our efforts, but based on when the grant cycle hits, Barry and I have talked about that already. We think we will be all right. It's just going to be a way of how we spend and when we spend. In addition, Cape Air, if you guys, I'm sure recall from the meeting with them, that they allocated $50,000 in advertising and marketing promotion efforts for their first year as well with the service. Moving into the budget allocation areas, a lot of these are very similar to what we have seen in the past. The reason why we are very heavy in the digital marketing realm is that the vast majority of Cape Air, well, twofold. One, we've always been fairly heavy into the digital marketing realm just because it is the point of purchase for our customers based on our fund allowance that we have. And we were in years past when we would have $40,000, $50,000, $60,000, which we have not had for 5+ years. But when we had budgets that high, that is when we would venture into more of the traditional marketing space. And we also had trade opportunities with some of the regional marketing outlets that are in the region, such as radio, TV, et cetera. But Cape Air, that is a big, heavy focus that they put in their marketing program. So they have a lot of dollars spent in those traditional mediums, in addition to some in the digital realm that specifically targets site traffic to capeair.com. So again, social media is a large component. We've been able to track a very good return on investment strategy with those dollars. Google advertising as well. Email marketing. We always have available funds for signage, brochure, and print. A portion of this budget was already spent on the hangar sign that you see that was swapped out that had the North Country Sky information on it. So when you're heading from the north to the south past the airport, that end hangar, if you guys have come in that direction, you probably noticed the large Cape Air branding with the American and United branding as well there. We're going to be
Yes, I noticed that
updating.
about a month ago.
Yeah, Barry, I think that was put up probably late October, early November.
I'd say November.
November, okay.
Okay.
In addition, we're going to be also updating some of the video assets. We've talked with Cape Air about that already, but with some of the COVID restrictions, that's been challenging to try to schedule, but we wanted to do some pieces with some of their staff, most notably the pilots, just getting a few sound bites from them. We're still planning on doing that, but it'll probably be sometime here in the next couple months at the rate that it's going. But right now, all of our video inventory is all of aircraft that we don't fly anymore. We do have a full photography set of all of the aircraft that's most notably the Technim that's used that we took on site during the first week of service. So we do need to get the video inventory updated so we can use that in our marketing and promotion channels as well, which we have planned. And then some of the other items that we have, grant management meetings and our chamber memberships that the airport specifically participates in still is allocated to come out of this marketing budget. As it relates to our markets, a lot of these are similar for the most part, with an asterisk to that, and I'll talk about that. So we've always had our digital marketing in the greater Chicago area and then in the Manistee and Traverse City region. We specifically really cannot afford to get into the Chicago region in any other way other than digital. A 2-3 panel billboard flight would take our entire budget for the entire year for 1 month in Chicago. So it's important that we continue to utilize those digital mediums in Chicago so we can still promote the service between Chicago and Manistee, because it's what we've been promoting, and we have a base of passengers there and have had a base of passengers there for the past 8 years. Cape Air, the vast majority of their marketing efforts is focused on Northern Michigan. Barry and I have talked with our marketing personnel at Cape Air about trying to kind of pin them down on a more defined marketing plan of how they're advertising throughout the region, but we have not yet really gotten that from them yet. But from what the conversations that we've had at our meetings, the vast majority of their marketing that they are doing is in the Northern Michigan region. And again, a lot of that marketing is in the traditional sense. So they've done outdoor panels, they've done a lot of radio buys, they've done some digital display with some of the news outlets, 7 and 4, 9 and 10. And the meeting that we have scheduled with them every 2 weeks, coming up here, we're supposed to be getting the basically the proposed plan of what they're intending on doing over the next few months. So that will be, and we're trying to complement each other. We're not trying to step over the top of one another, but the advantage is that we as an airport can just simply push a connectivity message, which is one that Cape Air really can't push as much because of just the capacity of them being an EAS service provider to Manistee from Chicago. So they really focus on those 2 points where we can really push a broader connection message across our interline partners that Cape Air has. Moving to some of those ad copy samples, these are some of the pieces that we've, in a similar format of what we've shown you in the past on social media. Some of the announcement ads of when the service came online, some of the remarketing ads that people will engage with inside of mobile apps and or websites. Our email newsletter subscribership has grown quite a bit over the years. We're over 12,000 right now. Good open rate of around 20%. We really push a connection message a lot, especially as of lately. And we're just from the social engagement that we have with our passengers online, we are finding that a lot of people are utilizing Cape Air to connect them through the main lines in Chicago here. Most notably right now, United is probably the best connection carrier. Barry, I believe that, is there those kind of fare reports that are still put out in the board discussions? Yeah.
Yep, that's coming up later.
Okay.
And just for example, to go on what you just said, in December, our PFC collections, which is a measure we have as to who's selling the tickets, American or United. United was 4-1 over American.
Yeah, I mean, when we will pull sample pricing, I mean, the fares right now that you can get are pretty incredible. Granted that, there's a lot of different people are at a very wide temperature set of whether or not they want to travel or feel comfortable traveling, but we certainly have a lot of connectivity options at the hands of American and United right now through O'Hare. One of the big items on the plan this last year was to launch a new website that was completed in advance of dropping the Cape Air service into Manistee. If you go to flymanistee.com, you'll see that it looks like the one that you see on the right here, as opposed to the one on the left. That's the old site. Big shout out to Barry, who programmed the connection flight component on the website, so you can pretty much search almost any destination through our website, and then it will redirect you to or through Google Flights, which will pull up a very similar booking widget that you would expect if you use Expedia, Travelocity, or any of those other OTAs. And then that'll allow you to book directly with the carrier itself. And so much to the degree where Cape Air is trying to recruit Barry to mimic that across its other EAS airports. So getting into the actual website data itself, some of these numbers are a little bit challenging to look at just because there's a lot of external conditions at play. We've got a pandemic, we've got the challenges service at the end of North Country Sky and public charters run with us right in the winter there. So, I mean, there was a lot happening when we compare this specific data set. So this specific data that you see here is actually the site traffic from September 1st to January 31st. And the reason I didn't do the entire year is because I wanted to do comparable differences between when North Country Sky was our carrier and now with Cape Air. So that's the reason why it's not an entire year over year, but it's, I guess, carrier over carrier comparison as it relates to 1920 and 20 to 21. So our users to the site, we're actually up 11%, almost 11% of users to the website, which a big spike in that was, it just came at the hands of announcing Cape Air, which, you know, should come as no surprise. But obviously there's a lot of different items that are at play. Traffic was down last year because of, or throughout, you know, various points in 2020 because of the pandemic. And so I just wanted to, again, like I mentioned, isolate it to just show kind of Cape Air versus the North Country Sky piece. But things that we had established in the goal setting process that we talked about quite extensively with you guys when we went through this presentation last year in advance of the EAS selection process was the need to have a carrier that had interline connectivity. We had a website that could handle the facilitation of showing our customers the potential for those fares, and then to have our website, most notably the booking side of it, actually be mobile friendly. The good news is that with our new website, you know, design and wrap, which was already mobile friendly, but the handoff to Google Flights, which then can either hand you off to Cape Air or it can hand you off to the mainline carrier. All of that is a much better booking process for the end consumer. Passengers year over year, again, this is taking the actual employment numbers. So these are looking at the 1920 and 20 to 21. So obviously the 20 to 21 is Cape Air figures. And we're, you know, even with in a pandemic climate are, you know, actually performing, I would say very, very well considering everything that we've had to, you know, try to deal with as a travel industry or a travel provider. So very similar numbers. There's 1789 last year, 1659 this year.
Those are good numbers.
Yeah, and seeing, you know, January, you know, January was January we were down, what, 2 weeks, I think, Barry, we were out last year in January.
Yep.
Yeah. So that certainly did not help. But even when you take a look at, if you doubled those numbers and you said, okay, we're just going to plug what we had in January with what we lost 1-to-1, you know, Cape Air is outpacing. I think a lot of it has to do with their connectivity offerings. Anecdotally and through social media chatter, there's a lot of people who are taking note to the fact that Cape Air really can connect you through those main lines. Flight searches, again, because of the public charters and North Country Sky booking engine, we really didn't have an exact science to figure this out. So we used a transfer page on the website to dictate when a search was made. So it's no surprise, plus it's a pre-pandemic climate. There was over 10,000 flight searches performed between September 1st and January 31st, 19 to 20. That would have been through the the North Country Sky and public charters service. So you had more flight searches than what we currently have, but not the same percentage number of employments in comparison. So a lot of people were looking but not buying. And in this case, we've had 7,361 flight searches, which I think is a really, honestly, very high number. And to have 1,659 bookings out of that, that starts to give us an idea. This data point here, this 7,361, and this data point of 1,659 is very helpful for us when we start talking about quantifying our digital marketing, because it allows us to understand, okay, when someone hits that search flight button, how many of those equate to a passenger that is potentially booking a ticket. And we know right now, based on those numbers, in our social media advertising since Cape Air service started, we will spend about $3.50 to $4.50. So $3.50 to $4.50 per booked ticket through our social media marketing. And that's in a pandemic climate. So I'm pleased about that, because we're sub $1 in some cases to just have them search for that fare or search for that flight, but we don't have the ability to track it through the entire process. So that's why these numbers are ones that we're going to be watching very closely over the course of the year. And again, a lot of that more exact data point is courtesy of, you know, what Barry has done from the flight booking component. So kind of moving into a little bit of just the insights that we have in working with Cape Air and what we have planned moving forward. We are one of the only websites that Cape Air actually pushes their direct advertising to. Most of the time, they are pushing it to capeair.com in their other EAS markets. Again, the reason for this is because of the actual connectivity experience that is available on flymanistee.com. So the fact that you can actually go to flymanistee.com and book a ticket between Manistee and anywhere. Other EAS airports do not have that functionality on their sites. So therefore, Cape Air usually pushes it to just capeair.com. The reason I bring that up is because when you go to capeair.com, there's really not a whole lot of mention of our individual community and its connectivity out, which I know from our discussion at the board level here is extremely important and is important to our growth in our actual employment numbers. So the fact that we're able to get them to leverage their marketing dollars to push to our assets is a definite benefit. And I wanted to mention it because it's something that all of their other EAS customers don't have that benefit because they don't have a website that functions to have a quality booking experience for the customers. In addition, we're going to continue pushing that connection message in a pretty heavy way throughout our partnership with Cape Air, just because they can't push that message as much. Some of it is regulatory, some of it is they really just push everyone to, you know, kind of book direct with them, and they focus on that idea and the philosophy of that they are the EAS airport that's providing, you know, service into Chicago. So it's a lot of that, you know, kind of Manistee to Chicago connection. You might have recognized it from their outdoor advertising. They, you know, push a lot of the fact that, you know, you can get to O'Hare for as low as, you know, $49. Again, because of the search capacity that the new booking widget has, I wanted to include this in here as well, the top 10 search cities that we've had to date. So this is actually our data from flymanistee.com. This is where our top search cities are, excluding O'Hare or Chicago as the end destination. So, you know, Orlando, Tampa, you'll see a lot of, I mean, you know, so number 1, 2, 4, 9, I mean, those are all Florida-based destinations. We know Denver is always a popular one with us, Detroit Metro. You're showing up right in the middle there. Las Vegas, Phoenix. So, you know, again, not overly surprising that warm weather destinations are what we're picking up at this time of year. And again, our cross section isn't huge and we don't have a ton of data, but we are going to continue to collect this information and be able to provide, you know, better marketing moves based on this. You know, we've talked about dropping targeted social ads about connection to Manistee into these specific markets. We can get very, very narrow with how we do some of that digital targeting. So we talked about sampling that, and then you know, Cape Air also expressed interest in looking at ways to partner with others to try to leverage additional budgetary dollars if possible. So looking at goals for the upcoming year, some of these I touched on earlier, but updating our video library to reflect the new carrier. Again, all the video inventory that we have right now that is used for, or all of our production inventory is primarily all of the 1900 or the Dojet or some aircraft that we no longer use. So it'll be important to get new footage specifically of the Technim. We know that, you know, there's some winter operation, de-icing, things of that nature that they're, you know, working on getting flushed out. But obviously for the foreseeable future, Cape Air's investment is in the Technim P2012 Traveler. So that's what we want to make sure that we capture that video inventory for, and working in partnership with them to find out other ways that they might be able to leverage that footage that we're getting as well. We'll continue to develop the digital advertising network and streamline those markets based on our specific reduced funding. So as our funding goes down, we need to continue to be creative in how we push our message and promote. We know our email marketing program is effective and it works. We're tracking that back to, I mean, just one of our bigger fair sale days that we had this past month, Barry, is when we pushed that e-message out. I think it was, early middle last week.
And actually, Brandon, give you an update, even more recent than that is the email blast that you put out last week resulted in our biggest sales day since Cape Air has started selling tickets at Manistee.
And it's reflecting directly at we see the spike in traffic on the website, we see the open rate, we see who's doing it. So, I mean, there's an advantage of doing that digitally and that we can follow that, which is really important when you have a reduced budget, because we have to make sure that we're quantifying our moves and putting our best foot forward. Obviously, so continuing that existing customer outreach is important. And that email marketing solution side is really critical. Now, Cape Air, they also have an email marketing program with customers as well. So we're trying to not overlap in that, right? But again, we have a very low unsubscribe amount coming from our database. So based on the industry standard, and we're not just hitting them all the time with a message just to say we touched that cross section of users. We're hitting them specifically with information about connectivity at timely points of the year. We're hitting them about critical information about the airport or changes to the climate. So I mean, we're hitting them with purpose. So there's a reason for them to actually open these email newsletters. And then again, this is a little bit of a different situation that we're in this year over where we were with Cape Air, or I'm sorry, where we were with North Country Sky and Public Charters. They really didn't have an internal marketing team or a network where Cape Air does. So it's a little bit different because there's an approval process, there's vetting that needs to be done before we're pushing things out. So, we're having to work a little bit further in advance than we had in the past, just because, they have people internally that need to review it to make sure that it, it's accurate and fits their, specs and brand. And again, it's not a challenge. It's just another step in the process and part of the workflow. But and being able to just have those touch points and communication with Cape Air has been helpful in order to ensure that we're complementing what everyone is doing. So,
Brandon, just we're an update that I just got this morning is that Cape Air is actively hiring a marketing manager for the Midwest region.
Well, that's good because they do need it.
I agree with you on that. But I just got word this morning from Andrew on that. So we will have a new person to interact with at some point once they find the right person. But I think it will make a lot of things better.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, I think with that, wrap it up. I'll turn the floor over to you guys. If you guys have any questions for me, I can jump back and forth in the slides. However, however you like, or any other questions that you guys have, I'd be happy to field them.
Okay. Is there any questions like Brandon is asking? I do have one, Barry. Can we get a copy of what Brandon just presented on the screen here?
Sure. I will send it out after the meeting.
I got it as a PDF, Barry. I'll send it to you right now.
Okay.
Okay. That was a good update, Brandon. Thank you very much.
I
Thank you.
actually have a question.
Sure.
And it's actually for one of my board members, Cindy. I'm pretty sure that you get our email newsletters. Not to mean to put you on the spot, but do you open them? And if you don't, that's fine. I'm sure you get a lot of email. But do you have any ideas of things, since you're in the industry, that you would like us to be communicating out that you think are relevant?
I do open those, but a lot of them are just thank you for traveling or booking you put out. No, actually, we've had some a pretty good response to the new airline because of the connections, which is very nice. And they transfer bags, which is a big plus.
Mhm.
I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but if there is anything, I'll let you know.
Please, we are always looking for input. So if there's, and again, because you have a unique position in the travel industry that we haven't had on the board before, anything that you can think of to help us improve our marketing, we'd appreciate listening to and getting that feedback.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah,
Okay.
especially around key times and locations throughout the year that you see a lot of demand for connection or travel to. Those are great to have as sub items. Just kind of dropping specific messages, even if it's obviously international travel right now is probably not the biggest demand, but
No, but believe it or not, though, I am sending a lot of people to Mexico.
Mexico
Oh,
is
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But a lot of the ones that you put up there are key ones that people are looking at domestically, though. Florida's a big one always.
Yeah. Well, and a note that I'll mention that Barry, in one of our meetings, we pulled, we talked about exactly how to look at targeting this connectivity message. And Barry pulled some of the top locations out of Traverse City seasonally in the winter months and the summer months and kind of comparing those. So that's part of our data pool that we want to be able to compare that data set that I had, showed you. I'll bring it up again. So, we're finally able to build our own data set, not based on where people are going, but what people are searching for, which is, in some cases, even more valuable. Obviously understanding where those end destinations are, that is the case as well. But I mean, just understanding what people are demanding is very, very helpful. And it'll be interesting to see how this specific item changes between May and August, September of this upcoming year. It's great. And I mean, Cape Air is really, from a marketing standpoint, it's great working with a carrier that has some of these options for us now, because we talked about it for so long, connectivity and that connectivity equating to interline baggage agreements, and the fact that we can book not just on, we only really talked about United and American, but I mean, they have Delta connectivity. I mean, if you're looking to get to Atlanta, you can get to Atlanta through O'Hare. They have, interline, and actually they might even have code share with, what is it, JetBlue? Barry is one of the,
Yes, they
here,
could.
yeah, code share with JetBlue. But so, I mean, they are a very well connected airline, which, and having that ability to maintain some of those fare controls between here and, Chicago specifically, right now it's working out well. I mean, I would love to have known what it would have been in a non-pandemic climate, but that we're not going to know. So there's no reason to even ask the question.
Right.
Okay,
Brandon, I've
Brandon.
got one thing for you. In my travels, I'm amazed at how many people are not aware that they can go on either United or American and book out of Manistee right now. And that's one nut that we need to try to crack.
Trying to convey that is a little bit challenging, because selfishly I would rather have them come to Fly Manistee, use our widget, and then they have the menu of flights through Google Flights, and then they can go and book. I mean, granted, they may go book directly after that, but
I think the point there is that people still don't realize they can get connections
just in general.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I
Sure.
think that's
Yeah.
something we are realizing too. And I think, if you didn't notice it, I certainly noticed it, but I talk a lot with Brandon, so I pick up on things that maybe the rest of the board doesn't, is we are really starting to hone in on that being our primary focus as it relates to our local dollars. Because we also realize that Cape Air, just because these are all partners of Cape Air, so it's more difficult for them to pick and choose, because in our market, it's really only American United, but in different markets, it's JetBlue. So from their perspective, as they're marketing nationwide, they don't push that message nearly as much. And in our experience now witnessing that, seeing this need, seeing kind of the reaction, we are slowly, or maybe not so slowly, transitioning to that being the primary focus of our marketing dollars this coming year.
Well, and a note, and Barry, I want to verify that I'm recalling this conversation correctly that we had with Erin, who's our marketing person, but she mentioned that right now, network-wide, Cape Air's biggest successes are in the Caribbean right now in comparison to their other, continental US routes.
Yep.
But Manistee, over the month of January, was one of their highest implaned routes that they had. And I believe a lot of that is at the hands of pushing a connectivity message, even though it's still not widely pushed out there. Part of it's by marketing restriction of what we can or can't say. I mean, we can't, in our Google display ads, we can't specifically call American and United by name. They will flag us for that. So we've got to try to get creative on how we, paint that connectivity message. But the advantage is that we do have it. Word of mouth is suggesting, based on social, when our ads are showing up, people are saying, "Oh, I connected to Denver. I had a great flight from Denver to Manistee. It was really easy, one hop through O'Hare, and it only cost me $280." I mean, so, those are really positive messages that are getting shared out there, that are getting picked up by people. But to build on Barry's point, it was actually astounding to me when we talked about connectivity with Cape Air right at the onset of this new EAS agreement, and having so many of their personnel actually say, well, we don't really push our interline partners through our other cities. Normally it's just, that EAS airport to the hub. That is what they do in the vast majority of their marketing. And, there's opportunity there in that. And we've known it because we've had that before. So that's part of, part of it is that we feel that it is proven, and we've had surveys with our customers that know that that's a demand. So now it's just a matter of trying to get it out there to the greatest cross section of people.
Brandon, a couple things. One is we're not your typical EAS airport. I mean, we have a lot more internal resources and focus than your typical EAS airport does on pushing and marketing the service. No other airport in EAS that I'm aware of has a marketing firm like Right Side Design and a marketing plan that is nearly this detailed and focused. And Cape Air is recognizing that. In fact, last week when I talked to Andrew Bonney, he mentioned to me that Manistee is making Cape Air a better airline because of the things we ask of them. And I think, maybe he's just saying that to make me feel good. But I do think there is some truth to that. And I think it is showing, and I think our marketing relationship with Cape Air is evolving. And again, we are pushing them in ways that no one's ever asked them about before.
Well, some of that even builds upon what has come from Mdot. I mean, so to pick on what Barry mentioned about no other airport is really doing what Manistee's is doing, that's also a message that Mdot has sent us for quite a few years. Mostly when that Mdot communication grant comes around, it's an airport director that's sending the composition for billboards and their yearly advertising flight in their local or regional newspaper. We're the first airport to ever ask them, they had no language whatsoever about any digital marketing at all in their actual communication plan. So, you know, I think part of it is the fact that, you know, Manistee's airport, the board, leadership, they've taken the position to say, you know, in order for the airport to grow, we need to, you know, have a plan in place, understand how that plan works, and then, you know, try to leverage as many of the outside partnerships as possible. And you know, it is something that's definitely unique to Manistee, and it's unique to, as Barry had mentioned, Cape Air's observations of it. I mean, they have a lot of small airports, and most airports do not make this a focus area at all.
Okay,
One other
Brandon.
little factoid to pass on to you, to also Brandon, is the PCA. I see Dylan Walker quite frequently, and I said, "Are you aware that you can fly on United or American out of Manistee?" Well, he said the problem of it is in their corporate, they could not book out of Manistee. Well, he texted me off his last week or the week before and said that he can as of now. So that's something else we need to probably make sure that some of our industry is aware of as well, that they do have that capability.
Building on that a little bit is talking with Aaron. One thing that Cape Air traditionally does in their EAS communities is they have a focus to try to reach out to the business community, get inside the business community, have these meetings with HR departments, with their large manufacturers, employers, et cetera. I think COVID has been a big problem because Barry and I still haven't even met Cape senior leadership actually face to face, which, I mean, they themselves admit is rather peculiar. And, you know, the fact that we've actually not met Aaron face to face yet, but it's only through Zoom. But I mean, normally, I mean, I've even had conversations with her that she would say, by now I would have been on site in our EAS community half a dozen times usually. So, yeah, I think that is definitely a component of Cape Air. I just think some of the actual climate right now is restricting that, but I do feel, especially hope, you know, fingers crossed, in the summer months, is that we're leading up into the summer months that we can start making some of those defined relationships, because I do think with connectivity we do have, and our frequency, we do have opportunity for a business travel market here.
And I don't know if I've mentioned this to the board in a previous meeting or not, but our current target plan is traditionally Cape Air wants to do a publicity-based ribbon cutting ceremony when they start a new market. Because of COVID, we weren't able to do that back in October, and then it kept getting pushed back, and then it became winter. We're now tentatively planning to do that when Cape Air launches the summer schedule, which doubles the number of daily flights in May. And at that time, Erin is planning on being here, and as part of her time here, she wants to schedule those meetings and, you know, meet with key players locally, especially in industry, and because they have programs that are targeted at businesses as far as ticketing and promotions and stuff that, you know, she wants to be able to kind of have those conversations. So that is tentatively scheduled for the May timeframe right now.
Okay, Brandon, is that pretty much it?
That is all from my end.
Okay, any other questions for Brandon? If not, we'll move forward, and thank you again, Brandon.
All right, thanks so much. We'll
Yeah,
talk to you all soon.
very interesting, very interesting.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay.
See ya.
Okay, moving on to the next order of business, approval of last month's minutes, January 11th. I presume everybody has had gotten a copy of it, and has had a chance to review it. Any comments, questions, changes? If not, could I have a motion to approve as presented?
Karen, I'll approve them.
Thank you, Karen. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. Julie, could we have a roll call, please?
Sure. Mr. Dunn,
Yes.
Ms. Goodman.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Ha,
Yes.
Mr. Suda,
Yes.
Ms. Kaminsky,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
Okay. Moving on to the Treasury Report. I assume everybody has had a chance to look at the January 2021 accounts payable report as presented. Any comments, questions? If not, could I have a motion to approve as presented?
So moved.
And I'll second it. Julie, could we have a roll call, please?
Yes. Ms. Kaminsky,
Yes.
Mr. Ha,
Yes.
Mr. Dunn,
Yes.
Mr. Suda,
Yes.
Ms. Goodman,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
Okay, moving on to the January 21 revenue and expenses sheet, as well as the trial balance sheet, and the attachments talking about rental and fuel and so on. I assume everybody's had a chance to look at it, has gotten a copy, and if there's no questions or comments,
I'll
do I have
make
a motion?
one, if I can make
Okay.
one comment. You'll notice on the accounts payable and obviously flowing through the rest of the reports, this past month, an expense of $41,000 for the PFAS testing. That is covered by a grant. We're planning on submitting grant reimbursement for that sooner rather than later, just because that total project grant is about $200,000, which we don't have fund balance to fund. So either we would need to basically tap into essentially the credit line of the county, or we need to get those reimbursed as quickly as possible. So our plan is to get those reimbursed soon, but anytime dealing with Mdot and those processes soon still can mean a few months. So just wanted to give some perspective of that, because that's shifting our fund balance negative rather quickly.
Right, and this is where Susan has added this extra line onto the revenue and expenses, just so we can flag that and watch that, correct? Barry?
I'm not sure which line you're referring to.
On the January 21, or, well, yeah. It's all the way to the bottom where we have miscellaneous expenses, state reimbursement.
Yes,
Yeah.
that line item is,
Yeah, that translates and covers back with the front page.
Yep.
The accounts payable. Okay. Did we have a motion to approve as presented?
I don't think we have had a motion yet.
No.
I don't think so. Could I have a motion, please? Yes. Okay. Julie, did you catch that?
Who made the motion,
Bill?
Jeff?
Phil. Phil,
Okay.
do I hear a second? If not, I'll make a second.
I was muted, I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you, and then, Julia, could we have a roll call, please?
Yes. Mr. Dunn,
Yes.
Mr. Ha,
Yes.
Ms. Goodman,
Yes.
Mr. Suda,
Yes.
Ms. Kaminsky,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
Okay, moving on to the next item we got on the agenda, committee reports and discussion. To my knowledge, we did not have an executive committee meet, nor a budget committee meeting. nor Capital Projects Committee meeting. So based on that, we'll move on down to Airport Director's Report.
And I'll just
Barry?
add one more thing on those committees.
Yes.
Since we were appointed last month, some of those committees still have some vacancies as we're waiting for the final board seat to be filled. So there's a couple things going on there as to why those committees are not yet meeting.
Right. In fact, we should be able to fill that vacancies as noted in the minutes in another couple, 3 weeks. Okay, Barry, the floor is yours.
Okay, let me bring up my report and switch sharing. Okay. So I have no incidents or accidents to report for the month. Next item here is a new federal executive order as it relates to transportation in the country was basically executed by our new president. And as that comes down to the airports, it is more restrictive than the current state orders as it relates to COVID. And basically the short version is that all people on airport property must wear a face covering, which is, as you've maybe noticed, why I am generally wearing one during the course of this meeting, even though I'm alone in my office, because I don't want to have to report myself or escort myself off airport property. It is, as I mentioned, a little bit more restrictive than state. It includes a requirement to wear face coverings while eating and drinking on airport property. You are only allowed not to have one on in between bites. And any violators of this, I need to log and report to TSA as security incidents. So some fairly strict stuff. In practice, it doesn't really impact the traveling public that much because generally the traveling public under state orders was required to do similar things, maybe not quite to the same degree, but it really does impact all of our employees and other staff here at the airport, whether we're indoors or outdoors. Basically, the requirement is in place anytime you're not in your personal vehicle. So it includes being outdoor as well as indoors. So just some more stuff that we're dealing with here in the current COVID environment.
So am I in violation, Jeff? I mean, Barry?
Technically are, but I'm not going to enforce.
Okay, I got it right here someplace. I might do the ear trick then. Go ahead.
I had mentioned last month that in December, the latest COVID budget stimulus package included additional funding for us. We are lumped into the general aviation airports in the definitions of that program. I'm expecting again about another $10,000 if the formulas are similar to the first round. I've heard no update on any details or timing on the rollout of this program right now. Manistee Township Master Plan zoning. I had mentioned in our last meeting that I was scheduled to participate in a meeting that week with the planning committee. That got canceled because of COVID reasons. They're trying to pull something together this month. I've reached out to Mdot and getting their zoning experts in the loop. I've got a call into me from Dwayne Anderson that I haven't responded to on this topic. So over the next week or so, I'm anticipating this coming back together with a plan as to when this conversation can get picked up. And again, just to remind people, there's some concern around in the township as they are redoing their master plan and subsequent to that, updating their zoning as how the airport impacts that. And some of this goes back more than a decade, where the last time they updated their zoning, they removed all of the airport restrictions that were in their previous zoning erroneously. And now there's potential impact with some development projects on the 31 corridor because their current zoning didn't reflect some of the requirements that should have been there. So we're just kind of trying to sort through this. And this is actually a case where I really miss Rob Carson being at the county, because he was kind of driving this from a bunch of different angles. But the current people working the county are doing a good job.
Okay.
Moving on to numbers. So Emplainment numbers for January. You'll see that we had a 193% increase versus January a year ago, due primarily to the fact that we actually flew the entire month this year, whereas last year the airline was dark for two weeks of the month. And that corresponds to a decrease pre-pandemic, pre-meltdown last year. So if you go back 2 years to 2019, that number is down only 14%. So we're doing actually really well in the current environment with regards to our enplanements in the pandemic COVID environment being down only 14% versus a kind of comparable pre-pandemic. On the performance side, we had 5 of the 124 scheduled flights canceled last month, which is a 4% cancellation rate. That's pretty good. It's still not where Cape Air wants it to be, but we're now starting to run into, I'd say half of those were weather cancellations related to O'Hare issues, and that's completely beyond anybody's control here. Still think they can do better on the delays, especially getting the morning flight out on time. That tends to be where we see most of those delays, is on that morning departure. It's supposed to be 7:15. It often ends up being 7:45. Not a huge issue because they've padded that schedule a lot. So even if they're out of here a half hour late, they're still ending up getting into O'Hare on scheduled time. But still, it's not where they want to be or I want them to be. Next, let me see if I can get this to display in a way that, okay. Brandon talked about this in his report, but this is my monthly airfare kind of synopsis. Snapshot taken last week. Travel basically a month out, midweek travel. Pretty consistent with what we've been seeing. We're on average running here about 10% more expensive than Grand Rapids, about $28 on average, $27, I guess. About $20 less expensive than Traverse City on average, which is, that's where I want to be. I want to be less expensive than Traverse City and not so much more expensive than Grand Rapids that people really, really want to make that 2-hour drive. but kind of in an in-between spot. And we've been there really since Cape Air started service. And, you know, but again, so much about the fares and just travel in general is not normal in the midst of the pandemic. So these aren't necessarily representative long-term. I hope they are, but not necessarily. So we'll see as I think things start normalizing as we get closer to summer, how and if this changes. But for right now, things are actually still looking very good from an airfare perspective. And then the second half of this report adds in, you know, a week's worth of parking, which really shifts that needle to making us, you know, easily the best option in the region. Not everyone incurs parking. You know, if you've got multiple people traveling in your group, that cost gets essentially shared amongst the group. So lots of things about this, but it's trying to reflect some of those other items that should be impacting people's ultimate decisions as to where and how they travel. Any questions on either airfares or our passenger numbers? None for me, Barry. Okay, I think I've got to go do this the hard way. Take this 3 times. I'm back to normal. Capital projects updates. The airport layout plan update project is continuing. I'm starting to see billing on that, so I know that Pre Newhoff is actively engaged on that project. I had a conversation with Bob Nelson late last week, and expecting some further interaction on my part in that project coming up shortly. And then the PFAS testing, the preliminary results are going to be shared with the board later under new business, and Bob Nelson of Pre Newhoff is on the call and will be leading that. Okay, good. Cape Air service updates. Overall, I'm, you know, day by day getting more and more comfortable with Cape Air, as well as I think they're getting comfortable with us as a new station. Already touched on some of this, but January emplainments were very good considering the current travel climate. Already talked about those percentage increases. This next item is actually, I find very interesting, is we did more passengers in January than we did in December. Normally, December beats January like 2 to 1. So that to me is reflecting kind of this uptick in Cape Air service. December was, honestly hampered by a national and state level message, don't travel. So that clearly depressed travel in December. But the fact that January could surpass December, it was only by like 5. So it was pretty flat, 2 to 2, but you know, it's still, that to me is remarkable. Talked about performance, talked about canceled flights. February is looking to continue that trend of January. You know, it's still early and we'll see what happens, but I think that February could be our first month where our total passengers actually exceeds our pre-pandemic comparison. And for that, I'm using 2 years ago, so February of 2019, which wasn't a stellar month for our previous carrier, but still was representative of, you know, their service towards, you know, the end, the last couple of years of their service. So kind of curious to see if we can actually pull that off for February.
Barry, this unusual weather we're having right now is not impacting you significantly? Not bad.
Wood, it hasn't.
Okay, good.
Things operated over the weekend fine. We did have a cancellation on, when did the front come through? Was that Thursday or Friday?
Yeah,
Um,
Thursday night.
Thursday, we had a cancellation on Thursday, and again, that was because O'Hare was delaying all incoming flights by
Okay,
like 3 hours. So they ended up canceling and then kind of picking things up. So again, things beyond our control, but operationally here on our end where we can control things a little better, so far the weather has not been impacting us. You know, in
I know
reality,
the weather,
this
I
weather.
know the weather,
Go ahead.
I know the weather is not that different than what we typically have in most winters, but it's just kind of different from what we've been experiencing in January this year.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Is this weather is
Okay.
normal, but it's really
Right.
the first time we've experienced it with the new carrier.
Right.
So there's, it's always a balancing act of understanding what they want and communicating well to make sure that we're doing things the way they need it for their operational performance. Right now, overall, I'm very optimistic for a very good summer season. But we'll see. That's partly assuming a little bit of loosening around COVID restrictions. We'll see if that happens or not with vaccine rolling out. But given that we're in the middle of winter and given where things are, I'm getting optimistic for summer. Continuing meetings with Cape Air on just performance and just overall anything. I had my meeting with them this morning and got updated on a few issues. Last month I had mentioned some of our operational and performance issues were related to some HR issues within Cape Air around one of their captains. That captain was basically pulled for a period of time, basically got additional training, counseling, has been back online here for the last 2 weekends. And this past weekend, no issues. The first weekend, some more minor things, but not to the extent that there was before. So that is still,
Good.
We're in a better position than we were. Hopefully we can continue that. Hopefully Cape Air can continue to minimize any issues regarding that particular individual. Technim winter ops update. So again, the ultimate solution to operating the Technim consistently through the winter is now in the FAA's approval queue around approving Cape Air's new de-ice plan. I asked this morning and I didn't really get in, there's no firm update other than everything's been submitted and now everyone's just waiting, which is typically how things work with the FAA. Means it could happen, soon, or it could not happen until it's no longer relevant until next winter. So we'll see. But the Technim has been operating more than I would have suspected, given our conditions here. But that's good because it clearly is a more customer friendly and desirable aircraft than the Cessna 402 that operates when the Technim can't. One thing I will, mention, it also came out of my call this morning, and I actually had an extra call last week on this, is part of our conversation a month ago with Cape Air. One of the items that came out of that is they were going to base 2 402s here as backup, so that they should always have a functioning aircraft in the case of a mechanical issue. And for some reason last week, we did not have that second aircraft here. So I reached out to them, and it was news to them too. So this is one of those cases where the comment I made earlier about us improving their internal processes is I report things to them that ultimately they then change internal processes to try to address. They currently don't really have an internal mechanism that tracks that aircraft are where they're supposed to be or where they've committed them to. And they're now investigating of implementing that so that I don't have to inform them that the fact that they promised to have 2 aircraft here and they weren't delivering was news to them. But they did get that second aircraft back here over the weekend.
That's good. That's good that you're communicating with them, Barry.
Yes, no,
Very good.
communication is key.
Good.
The Cape Air was supposed to increase the per flight capacity from 8 seats to 9 seats as of February 15th. That has been postponed, and they're sticking with 8 seats. And basically, until the Technim can reliably be available in our market and used, and again, you know, the winter limitations in place right now are one of the things that is the primary issue right now. They don't want to sell 9 seats because if they did sell 9 seats and then they operate the 402, they cannot fulfill the board's other desire that all flights operate with 2 crew members, because the 402 only has 10 seats. So in order to put 9 passengers on there, they have to bump the first officer. And per the feedback from the board earlier, that is not something we desire. So therefore, they are still keeping that 8-seat max in place for the foreseeable future. And, you know, that does come into play. I mean, I know this Thursday and Friday, we've got 2 flights that are currently sold out. And I think Sunday and Monday, we've also got 2 more that are sold out. So, you know, we could start utilizing that extra seat. You know, you think about it's only one more seat, but when you're only dealing with 9 seats, that's 10%. So, you know, we're taking a potential 10% limitation in our ability to fly passengers. Again, not as big of an issue in the heart of winter, but keeping an eye on it as we get into spring. Rental car update. So after my initial good conversation with Hertz back in October, they've gone completely quiet and are not responding to my outreach to them. So I'm anticipating what happened is one of the deliverables that they had asked for out of the first call was some basically numbers. And as a result of me sharing kind of our rental history numbers, I think they just looked at the numbers and said, it's not worth our time, especially when they're going through their bankruptcy. So I just wish they would come out and tell me that as opposed to just not responding. But, you know, regardless, I have over the last 2 weeks had calls from both Victorian Carport as well as Watson's Manistee. And they are both interested in doing something with or without Hertz being involved. So I'm planning on following up over the next 2 weeks with them to have see if we can have improved rental car offerings as we get into summer, to hopefully handle what I'm anticipating is increased demand in that area. So that's my rental car update. I don't really have anything else to add on marketing, since we already spent 40 minutes on that at the beginning of the meeting. And then I've been tracking this now for a couple of months. I added the last bullet here. The ball's currently in my court. I need to get examples from other airports of their rules and regulations as it relates to these items: auto rentals, air tours, and aircraft maintenance on site. So once I get those and the committee makeups get completed, I'm anticipating the board can move forward on that. And that is my report.
Well, Barry, I might just add, I've been kind of slow on trying to get a meeting together on ad hoc meeting members. I said I was going to try to do it, but I think what I'm going to try to look at maybe in the next week or so is just to get us together to start talking and see what we might want to look at as you collect information,
Okay.
just to start building on it. So the ball is kind of in my court also. Okay. Moving on. Does anyone have any old and unfinished business? I'm not aware of any. If not, we'll go on down to new business. And we have several items in the new business category. The first is the ARFF training grant approval. That's been attached to, as Appendix A to the agenda for today. I hope everybody's had a chance to kind of look through it. And it's for firefighting training, and I'm going to turn that over to Barry.
The only thing I will add is this is an annual program that Mdot has to help airports fund their required recurrent training. As it relates to Mdot grant funding, this is basically the one program that they are still planning on funding, even though while their budget is being restricted. Brandon mentioned earlier that the airport awareness grants that we use for marketing, those have been basically eliminated for the coming year. And they also have in the past sometimes had money for capital projects. That's been essentially eliminated as well. The one program they're still funding is this training. They provide up to $2,000 training to each airport. And this is something we get every year. So in some ways, this is just a formality in approving a regular grant that we get from the state.
So the $2,000 generally covers what we have, what we spend, and so on, right?
When we do training off-site, so sometimes, like last year, we bring the training vendors to the airport and then invite the local Manistee Township and others to participate with us. When we do that, this covers roughly a third of the costs. On other years, which this coming year will be one, we just send our staff to a different airport to basically join in their training. And then we're basically paying mileage and then just a per person fee for that training, in which case this does cover it. So this will pretty much cover our training expenses for this coming year.
Okay. Barry, we're looking for a vote of approval for you to go ahead and sign and
Yep, and because this is a state document, given their new requirements around digital signatures, I would ask that I be the one authorized to sign, since I've gone through that process of having the digital signature stuff working.
Okay. If there's no further questions, could I have a motion from someone to authorize Barry to electronically sign and go forward with this request for aircraft rescue and firefighting training?
This is Karen Goodman. I'll make that motion.
I'll second
Okay.
it.
Thank you.
Mr. Peterson, did you second that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Julie, could we have a roll call, please?
Yes. Mr. Suda,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Ms. Goodman,
Yes.
Ms.
Okay.
Kaminsky,
Did she leave us?
no, I think
Nope,
she's
I'm
muted.
here. Nope, I
Okay,
got
Okay.
muted. Sorry. Yes.
Mr. Haw,
Yes.
and Mr. Duns did leave a message on there. He left around 1 o'clock, so he's gone now.
Correct.
All set.
All set?
Yes.
Okay, the next item of new business is a request by the airport to do a dedication on the SRE building for our friend Jeff that passed away last summer. Barry, you want to tell us about it here?
I think the letter that the airport employees put together explains pretty well what's being asked. Basically, they're asking for permission, exact details to be worked out, but for permission to essentially dedicate the SRE building in the name of Jeff Wright, who passed away this past summer. He basically was responsible for all of our maintenance, and every time anyone who's worked here for a while goes in that building, that's who they think of, just because of he laid it out. He's done everything about it. And the fellow coworkers really feel that it would be nice to do this. Not asking for any funding on this. This will all be paid. Any expense, plaque, or whatever that ultimately is incurred would be paid for through private donations. So they're just looking for the blessing to move forward with this from the authority.
Okay, I will make a motion myself to go ahead and ask the board to approve the request to dedicate the SRE building to Jeff.
I will second that. Karen Goodman.
Okay. Julie, could we have a roll call on that, please?
Yes. Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Haw,
Yes.
Mr. Suda,
Yes.
Ms. Goodman, yes. Ms. Kaminsky.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
And one thing about that is, once the details get worked out, I'll bring back to the board a final version of what the plan is as we get closer to doing that. Probably, I'm anticipating sometime this summer when it's warmer.
Okay. Sounds good. We'll be looking for that, Barry. Next item on the new business, 2019, 2020 budget amendments. Barry, is this where we just have to adjust the budget to bring it in line with accounting practices and stuff like that?
That is exactly what it is, yes. So this is basically for the last year's budget, final budget adjustments that reflect our actuals for the year, and kind of, where there are some things where budget items weren't quite in sync, bringing those in line.
So the new adjusted budget is actually for 2019-20
Yes.
/ 20, right?
Yep.
And that's what'll go in the books and so on, right?
Yep.
Okay,
Susan has already shared this with the auditors because it's one of their
Okay.
requirements, but it does need board approval.
okay. If there's no other questions and everybody has had a chance to look at it, could I have a motion, please, to, accept the proposed new adjusted budget for 2019/2020 as presented?
Yes, Bill.
Okay. Julie, did you get that?
I did, yes.
I'll second it.
All right, roll call. Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Ms. Goodman,
Yes.
Ms. Kaminsky,
Yes.
Mr. Suda,
Yes.
and Mr. Ha.
Yes. Okay, down to an update on the FOS testing preliminary results. Barry, I believe you got Bob someplace in the background who's gonna help explain what we're looking at.
As part of your packet were two, basically,
Correct.
and they kind of show where the testing sites were, and then the one that has the additional numbers are actually the results. I think, Bob, you have something to present with. You should be able
Yes.
to go over and share. So I will
Okay.
turn it over to you.
All right. Let me do that here. Make sure I grab the right indicator. All right. Just perhaps reintroduce myself to some and introduce myself to others. Bob Nelson with Pride Newhoff. Pride Newhoff has been working with the authority for a number of years now. As you may have seen and heard, we've been helping you out with a number of projects, and in particular regard to this project, some very specific subject matter expertise needed to come into play. So Brennan Newhoff teamed with Limnotech. And so based upon our work with them, we helped you put together a proposal, and you guys got a grant this fall. And then we performed that work this fall, and we're just starting to get through the results now. So that's what I'm here to present to you. So for this first phase of the work, it was just merely, hey, you've used AFFF, so the aqueous film forming foam, something that's used in your firefighting capabilities, something that's required by the airport to be essentially tested and dispersed, or at least previously was. There's now a cart to help avoid that in the future, but so there's this known use, and so it was more of a verification type of testing scenario where we looked at where we knew those had been tested, and then just sampled a couple other spots just to get a sense of general potential areas of impact, and also get a little bit of information on groundwater flow. So what you'll see here is we essentially had 4 different locations. There was 2 borings located just east of the terminal apron. We put another one just up south and west of the terminal, and then one down here just south of the west end of the runway. So those were the places where we did the soil borings. But then in addition to that, there was a number of sample spots that we did to the 2 unnamed tributaries to the Manistee River. So with that, we have 4 borings, 3 monitoring wells, and 8 surface water samples. So given that,
Bob,
yep.
I'll just add in that the 2 borings that are like right near each other, that area is the known area where we dispensed the foam, the firefighting foam for training purposes. So that's kind of like ground zero.
Yeah. So this is the spot where we, yeah, to Barry's point, expected. Again, going back, not only our history together, but going back through other records too, we kind of went back and verified that there were no other accident reports with PFAS or foam involved. So going back to our sample results here, there was, with the soils, you test at multiple intervals on the way down. And here, let me switch gears here.
Bob, one question. You said we had 4 soil boring deals on this little map, but I only see one deal that's showing up as a soil boring. Are they all right around
Sure.
that one spot?
So here, does my cursor show up?
Yep, I see
Okay.
that.
So to Barry's point, so we have soil boring 1 and soil boring 2, just
Oh,
east.
okay.
And then, so monitoring well 2 and soil boring 3 are the same thing, and that's just south and west
Okay,
of the terminal
got it.
over here. And
Okay, I got
last,
it now.
okay, yep, okay, very good. So
Okay, I
I'll,
see the SB now, SBs, okay, got it.
And, I think what's confusing there is the key on the thing calls it monitoring well with the little icon with the triangle in it. But for each one of those, there was a boring done that the monitoring well is now monitoring.
correct.
So they were both done in the same spot?
Yes, sir. Yep.
Okay, got it.
So yeah, and just to help understand that a little bit better, yeah, if you're drilling a hole anyway to get those soil samples on your way to drill that hole down to the groundwater, they were just testing the soil as they were going down to install the monitoring well. So that's why they're in the same spot.
Okay, got it.
So PFAS, let's just say there's a number of different compounds involved. We tested for 28 of them generally, and only a subset of that are actually currently regulated by the state. So starting with the soil samples, there's actually only 2 regulated substances there. In going through the results, they were detected in 3 different samples. However, only one of the regulated compounds was above the Michigan Part 201 criteria. So and again, in terms of this analysis, we're talking for soil in parts per billion. So a very small fraction. The regulatory limit is 0.24. And we did have results just above that in 0.27 and 0.31. Again, both of those in this testing area, so not perhaps too surprising that those results came back with that. Similarly, in groundwater, in this case, in terms of groundwater, we're talking about parts per trillion. And of the 28 compounds, only 7 are regulated. And so in all of these locations at the monitoring wells, at least one of those compounds was detected. However, only one sample exceeded that Part 201 criteria for the groundwater. And again, the criterion is 0.08. And so this is where you're seeing where my cursor is now. This item in yellow and red was a 24.2. So in this case, 8 versus 24.2. Again, up in this ARF testing area. The other thing I would say that's notable about our monitoring well results is that we have a pretty good level of confidence that by this blue arrow here, that the groundwater flow is traveling in a south-southwest direction. And I know this came up in conversations with Barry. We feel that's significant and may bear further follow-up with MPART and Eagle, but again, the city's municipal well is located on the airfield over here, just east and south of the runways. They've been doing their own testing and have not had any hits. And I think our general analysis shows why that will likely continue to be the case. So.
And since you're talking wells, the other well on airport property is the supply well for the terminal and buildings. And samples were taken from that water as well, and nothing was detected there. Even though that's much closer to the training area. But again,
Right.
based on the direction of flow, not downwind per se of potential issues.
Barry, that well that you're mentioning that supplies the airport here, how deep is that well?
I do not know. And Bob, we had talked about that, and I don't know if you ever dug it up or not.
I will be honest, I didn't remember to do that. If I don't have a specific number, my recollection is that it's relatively deep though, something
Okay.
to the tune of like 300 feet. And again,
Okay,
the groundwater that we were getting to was, quite a bit shallower than that.
right. That was my question on that, because I know, just like the city well over here, that's probably down 300 feet anyway. And so that, where you've got it for supplying the airport here, going down 300 feet is going to protect it pretty much from any surface contamination from the PFAS, which is
Yeah.
what you found in the testing.
Yes, sir. Yep. And again, there may, in talking with Empart and the Eagle folks, they may request we do some additional work to evaluate that, but that will be a follow-on task. The intent was to communicate these results to you, and then following this, we'll get that information off to Eagle, and then there will be a follow-on phase for whatever Eagle would like us to perform in terms of additional sampling and that sort of thing.
Okay.
Last but not least, and I think important, there was no PFAS detected in this east tributary. That being said, there was at least some compound found in all samples over here in the west tributary. But again, in terms of the analytes that are actually regulated, all of them were below criterion. So in general, I would say very, it's unfortunate that it's there. It is one of those forever compounds. That being said, comparatively to other airports and stuff that I'm aware of or posted even on the Empart website, it is the case that your levels are quite a bit below theirs, which is a good thing for you. Again, we'll have to wait and see what they would like us to do moving ahead. But it is the case because of both of those analytes in both the soil and in the groundwater. Because those are exceedance values, Manistee will get added to the state's Empart website for a Part 201 site for PFAS. So that is something that will, hit the state environmental news, so to speak. Trying to think, that's really all I'd say at the very high level of the results of our analysis. Again, this will we kind of have a draft report that'll get submitted to Eagle, and then we'll give you a follow-up when we get further direction from Empart, Eagle, and the Mdot Aeronautics folks about how they want us to proceed. But I guess with that, any questions?
Yeah, just for my clarity here, the only test result that was above the required number was the one at the top of the screen there, in that where it has the PFDA at 24.2.
Yeah, in that case, it's actually PFOA, but yes, that is the 24.2, and that's just in the groundwater. There
Okay.
technically is a soil, and I trying to see if I can see the corollary.
Now, the 24.2 is parts per billion or parts per million?
In that case, that's parts per trillion.
Trillion?
Yep.
Oh,
So that's parts per trillion. There is in the soil, there was one, we had essentially both of the soil boring samples over here had a test that was above criterion as well, but I think they just have water and groundwater in here that the 0.24 or the 2.4 exceedance for the soil sample is again, there's a 0.27 and a 0.31 up in here, but in this particular exhibit, those don't show up. But in general, that's what they consider a soil cleanup level. And basically, it's to the point where we need to figure out a way to address it, perhaps removal, perhaps some sort of restriction. So we'll, again, at some point, we'll figure out a plan about what's going to happen with it. But we don't know that step quite yet.
okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other
So-
questions?
Yeah, so our levels, this is Mr. Peterson. So our levels are considerably lower than other measured airports, and there's no further use of those products. Is that correct?
Well, so in terms of the two different things there, yes. In answer to your question, compared to some of the results that I've seen for other airports and those that have been posted, you're among the lower levels that I've seen. In terms of use, the authority is required to continue to use the chemicals that have this by the FAA. There is no approved substitute by the FAA at this point in time.
Bob, I'll
It's
just
something they're working on.
just clarify that is required to have those chemicals. Use would only be if we had a on airfield emergency that required, dispensing the product to extinguish fire.
So
So
they're
And
not
on the-
actually using
we're not
training
doing
like they.
anything that is adding more to the environment at the current time, as long as we don't have a fire on the airport where we're basically using the product for its intended purposes, which is ultimately to save lives.
Yeah, that would have been a better way to word my question. As far as yearly testing now, it's contained, right?
Correct. The current testing is contained.
Okay.
Good, good question. Okay, if there's nothing else of Bob, or you got anything else to report, Bob, if that's it, we'll,
I'll
Okay,
just
thank you.
add again, and Bob mentioned this, but I just want to make sure that the board is aware, is because this testing does have values that exceed in some of these reports, we are going to be probably under the spotlight. The state has a very much perused website that is showing sites across the state that have these issues. We will be added to that list shortly. And therefore, that might produce some negative PR for us that we need to make sure that we're aware of.
has to be done,
Yep.
so can't avoid it. Okay. Anything else, Bob?
Nothing that on this. Yeah, if you have any other questions about this or other
No.
items, yeah, let me know.
No, I think we're all set. Any other board members with questions? Otherwise, I will move on. Okay. Again, thank you, Bob. Any comments to close us out for the afternoon here? Any comments by authority members before we go ahead and adjourn? If not, meeting's adjourned. Thank you.
everybody.